And today we're going to do a little bit of a background on the back-based study for those who are following along or new to the initiative. We'll talk about where we've been in terms of the 2024 report and an overview of that. And then we'll talk about where we're going, mainly focusing on the 2027 report and scoping for that. There'll be a question and answer session at the end. Like we usually do. We'll stay on and answer any and all questions that you all have. So please use the chat function in Zoom to introduce yourself, ask questions, or share comments or ideas. We have staff from our office monitoring the chat. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with a welcome. I'll first introduce our Interim Chief Resiliency Officer for Miami-Dade County's Office of Resilience, Dr. Patricia Gomez. Patricia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Christian. My name is Patricia Gomez. I'm the Interim Chief Resilience Officer with Miami-Dade County. Today here, welcome you to this public meeting on the Miami-Dade County Back Bay Coastal Storm Risk Management Study, or like many people know it, the Back Bay Study. And you will be seeing tonight a few new faces like myself and Colonel Abichal, but you also will see some familiar faces like Christian and others that have been with you walking along the way. I appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy schedules to be here this evening. As I mentioned, this process has been a long one, and your continued commitment and engagement have been critical to our collaboration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I want to especially thank the U.S. Army Corps Norfolk District, Colonel Sonia Bichal, and the Chief of Planning and Policy Branch, Michelle Hammer, the Jacksonville District, and the entire Army Corps family for their continued support and expertise through this study. Last time we checked, the 2024 study was wrapping up, and the chief's report had been signed and ready to be presented to Congress for potential funding in the next Water Resource Development Act. We are very hopeful that the initial recommendations included in the report will be authorized this year, and funding will be appropriated by Congress soon. You'll hear more details about this project in the next few minutes. As you will hear as well today, the primary focus of the 2027 Chief's report will be floodproofing and elevations for buildings. These measures will best reduce risk, and we need you, our boots on the ground, to help us identify these priority areas. In addition to advancing actionable projects in the near term, we are working together with the Army Corps of Engineers to conduct modeling and research that can inform a long-term solutions to protect our Miami-Dade residents, home, and business. We are really deeply sorry to see what the last hurricanes have caused here in our state. They are very destructive. Our neighbors on the West Coast in Tampa and St. Petersburg have taken on the brunt this year, but we, Miami-Dade County, are always at risk. Against the backdrop of hurricane season, we are reminded that our risk is also amplified by king tide. King tide season shows that the sea level rise amplifies tidal flooding and potential storm surge, and when combined with heavy rainfall, can make it more challenging to manage flooding. So we want to hear your voice and integrate your firsthand experiences as the experts of our community. All along, your voices have helped steer us in the direction toward a new approach that better protects our community and provides added benefits to our environment, people, and economy. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today with us, and I'll pass it on to Christian. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Appreciate that. Happy to now introduce the 61st Commander of the Norfolk District, Colonel Sonny Abichal, who I know has some roots and history here in South Florida. So, Colonel, please take it away.
So, Christian, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. So, yeah, so I actually I went to high school in I lived in North Miami Beach and went to high school in Fort Lauderdale. So this is great that we're able to help in doing this study. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Colonel Sonny Abichal. I'm the commander for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Norfolk District. And it's my honor to welcome you to tonight's virtual webinar on the Miami-Dade Back Bay Coastal Storm Risk Management Feasibility Study. Tonight, we gather to discuss an important initiative aimed at enhancing our resilience of our coastal communities here in Miami-Dade County. As many of you know, on August 26th, the significant milestone was reached with the signing of the Chief's report by Lieutenant General Scott Spellman, the commander of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This report marked a pivotal moment as we transition to the new stage of the study, an expanded analysis of the essential risk management measures that will build upon the recommendations of the recent Chief's report to manage the risks of coastal storm surges to more of the community. The continued Miami-Dade Back Bay CSRM feasibility study is not only a technical analysis, it represents our commitment to you, our residents, partners, and stakeholders. This study is a collaboration between the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Miami-Dade County, supported by key stakeholders and municipalities that amplify the voices of the community. Together, we aim to identify, evaluate, and recommend solutions that will address the pressing coastal storm surge risks affecting our infrastructure, public health, and safety. In our efforts to ensure that we address the unique needs of our community, we are currently scoping new focus areas for this study moving forward. As we continue this effort with Miami-Dade County, your feedback and insights are invaluable to us. This study is about more than just managing risk. It's about ensuring that we as a community and as a nation are prepared to face the challenges posed by coastal storms. We're here to listen to your thoughts and concerns, and I encourage you to actively engage in the discussion this evening. Thank you for being here, for your commitment to our community, and for your partnership in making Miami-Dade a more resilient place to live. I look forward to our conversation tonight. Thank you. Back over to you.
Thanks so much, Colonel Abichal. Yeah, really appreciate the welcome. They really summarized a lot of where we're at and where we're going, but we'll break it down a little further here tonight as part of this presentation. I'm going to start by giving off a little bit of a background for those who may be new to this initiative. Sincere support has been with us for many years with this study, and we appreciate folks who've continued that. As Dr. Gomez mentioned, we had many friends, loved ones who have been impacted by recent storms just this year, especially on the West Coast, Central Florida, and other parts of the Southeast. So, Hurricanes Milton and Helene, did make their way and affect millions across the Southeast. And storm surge, which is really the focus of this Back Bay study, was quite significant. We saw a lot of images like the one on the bottom left here coming from the National Hurricane Center and media outlets about forecasted storm surge of in some places 2 to 4 feet, but in others upwards of 10+ feet. And we also saw other images right on the right hand side of what places like Tampa Bay and the efforts that they have in place to flood-proof some of their critical infrastructure, like the Tampa Bay Regional Hospital. So this is just one, small example of how a community is adapting to live with water and hurricane risk. And it's some of the types of things that we are also advancing here in Miami-Dade County with the Army Corps and otherwise. So it's a good reminder, we have a lot of vulnerabilities and we're responsible for taking action to address those in an equitable way. So With that, I just wanted to kind of zoom out for us in the Miami-Dade community. You know, when we think about where our county sits, on the west side, or what's showing on the top of the screen here, we have, you know, one major area, the Everglades, that's been transformed quite dramatically over time. And we also have the Biscayne Bay and Atlantic Ocean on the seaward side. So we, in many ways, our urbanized area is sitting between two waters, and we have to worry and be concerned with, you know, water from all sides. We have storm surge, which is the focus of this study, that can come from the coast or from the south. We also have rainfall and the impacts that has on our large canal and stormwater drainage systems. And of course, with sea level rise, we see amplified effects of tidal flooding, groundwater rise, and of course, storm surge. So we have to think about how all of this is connected, and try to come up with solutions that help, you know, address these different risks that our county faces. And so that's part of what this study is looking at. Just to kind of zoom in, you know, this is a graphic. If we look from left to right, we can kind of talk about how, you know, in our coastal areas, we see more vulnerability to storm surge from hurricanes, but also waves, in addition to sea level rise and higher storm tides. And then, you know, inland or even on our barrier islands, when we get rainfall, we can see flooding as well. And I know that's in large part what we've experienced here in Miami-Dade. Many residents have seen flooding from just rainfall or large afternoon thunderstorms. And it's this area that sort of overlaps those two. Whenever we get more than one or two or more of these flood hazards combined, from the coast and from inland, you know, rainfall flooding, we get what we call compound flooding. So that's this area in orange where you see an amplified effect. It's harder to manage risk in these areas because there's multiple drivers of that risk. And we also know, you know, thinking about our canal systems, with sea level rise, the drainage capacity overall can be reduced. And so there's a lot of integrated efforts locally and regionally to address that, which we'll discuss a little bit too. But we're focused on storm surge with this study and integrating efforts as much as possible. For this back-based study, we wanted to just quickly recap ways to manage coastal storm risk. So, you know, this is our opportunity to explore different ways to manage risk in vulnerable communities from storm surge. And this can happen at different scales. So on the far left side, you know, we can adapt our critical infrastructure or individual buildings, as you see with this home on the left. That helps us reduce impacts during a flood. And this is part of the recommendations from the 2024 report, floodproofing commercial buildings, elevating residential buildings, and floodproofing critical infrastructure. At a slightly potentially larger scale than the individual building, we can look at, you know, what we call nature-based solutions, the type of work that's been done, restoration work for many years. It's just another way of talking about this work, because nature-based solutions help us reduce the impacts during a flood, and they also support the environment and our economy year-round. So many of you are familiar with our coral reefs or hybrid reefs. We can look at dune reinforcement, living shorelines, restoration of mangroves and wetlands, and other potential projects to help reduce or manage risk from storm surge. And then lastly, at a much larger scale, are potential structural measures, right? These help control and keep the water out, whether they're elevated berms or levees or systems of floodgates and walls. These first two are what's being advanced in the short term, while the structural measures is something we're not recommending at this time, but want to continue to study to see if it could be feasible in the future. But right now we're really focused on doing these things that we know will help us in the coming hurricane seasons. And I wanted to just also really highlight when we come up with these principles of success, this reflects not only the county's priorities, but really what we've heard from you all, the public, in the last 5 years. So your input has led us to kind of figure out, what is the what, the why, the who and where, and the how. The what we've talked about before. If you've been with us, we want to look at multiple lines of defense to manage our risk. We want to try to maximize comprehensive benefits, meaning not only looking at economic benefits, but also environmental quality and social equity benefits. Prioritizing environmental justice communities. We know certain groups within our community might feel impacts first and worst during a hurricane storm surge, so we want to prioritize those as much as possible. And then integration is really how do we make sure this study actually complements and works with all of the other Army Corps, South Florida Water Management District, and county and municipal and non-governmental efforts that occur. We want to see complementary actions taken with this study. And to sum that up, from the county's perspective, these strategic goals stem from those principles. And I think many of you are aware of this, but I'll just really try to drive the point home that number one for us, engagement and the top priorities of our Miami-Dade County community will continue to drive the process as much as we can. And number two, the county will be continuing to advocate for planning, benefit cost analyses, and implementation to be as comprehensive and equitable as possible. Number three, we want our decision-making to be not only flexible, but also action-oriented so that we can advance the well-supported projects in the short term while we evaluate longer-term options. And then really important for us to emphasize is that this back-based study is really just one set of opportunities and a potential catalyst among a real wide range of potential partners and projects that the county is exploring to address flood risk and the related resilience issues like water quality, et cetera. So we really have to thank you all who are attending for helping us get to this point. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Hammer, the Chief of Planning and Policy branch at the Norfolk District, to help us review where we've been with the 2024 report. Michelle?
Thank you, Christian. And I want to say good evening to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we will go ahead and jump into just a quick overview of the 2024 report. But before we jump into that, or while we're jumping into that, I wanted to kind of walk through the process for the feasibility study. We may have covered this previously, but just walk through the number of steps that leads us ultimately to construction and then ultimately to operations and maintenance by our non-federal sponsor. So before we can begin a study, Congress provides authorization through recently what is a Water Resources Development Act. Older authorizations may have come through flood control acts, but this is Congress's permission for us to study a water resources problem. And we are a water resources agency. So our main business lines are navigation, that's our oldest, flood risk management, and then aquatic ecosystem restoration. Those are our three main business lines. So Congress provides us that approval. Then we enter into an agreement, in this case, a feasibility cost share agreement with a non-federal sponsor. And that initiates our study, and we work through the feasibility study with certainly our non-federal sponsor and stakeholders and all the great input from the public. Well, that feasibility study culminates in a chief's report, and that chief's report is signed by our commanding general or chief of engineers. And that chief's report is coordinated through our Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works and through the Office of Management and Budget. And ultimately, that ends up into another Water Resources Development Act to authorize construction. In that same time frame, certainly we work through submitting what's called capability into a budget process. And capability just means this is our ability to do work. We submit it for consideration in the president's budget. While we are waiting for the project to get authorized for construction, we can enter into what's called the design phase, or the pre-construction engineering and design, short for PED, short as PED or design. And we signed another agreement, which is a design agreement, which kicks off the design phase. And we can enter into that design phase, that PED phase, while we are waiting again for that authorization. This allows us to continue the design for the recommended plan until such time as it's authorized by Congress. And also that leads us to our first contract for construction. Next, we'll enter into another agreement, which is called a project partnership agreement. All of this, of course, again, we are continuing to coordinate through the president's budget to make sure that that is continued to be considered and funded. We'll enter into construction. Now, even when we're in the construction phase, there may be some elements, some phases of the plan that are still in design, and there'll be other elements that are in construction, because as we look at a larger project and we think about the availability of funding from the federal side and certainly from the non-federal side, the funding for the entire project is not always available right away. So we have to go over multiple cycles to get that funding as we work through construction. Ultimately, we will complete construction and then we turn it over to our non-federal sponsor for operations and maintenance. So there's a few steps that we have to get through to get to the completed project. But I just want to highlight, right now, of course, we are celebrating, and we'll talk more about the 2024 Chiefs Report. We're celebrating that win of that signature. It's working through coordination, again, through the ASA, ultimately to OMB and to Congress. And then highlighted, of course, by the stars, the black star, that's where we are right now for the 2027 report. So just a little bit of status of where we are on both of those study efforts.
Thanks, Michelle. Can you actually describe real quick the cost share associated with the different phases, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely. So while we are in the study phase, that is cost shared. Traditionally, it's cost shared 50-50. Now, in this case, it was funded by an emergency supplemental. So that was 100% federally funded. But normally, traditionally, we have a cost share with our non-federal sponsors of 50-50. Now, when it moves into the design phase, it has the same cost share as when we are in construction. And because this is a CSRM project, a coastal storm risk management project, that cost share is 65-35. So that's 65 federal and 35 non-federal. All right. As has been mentioned before, this 2024 Chiefs Report focused on a couple of different elements. Certainly, we were focusing in on elevations of residential homes and floodproofing of non-residential homes and floodproofing for critical infrastructure. So these are things that we can do rather quickly to begin to reduce risk, to manage coastal storm risk within Miami-Dade. Additionally, in the Chiefs Report, we identified 2 additional elements: a nature-based solutions pilot program, looking at approximately $180 million to implement nature-based solutions within Miami-Dade County. Now, these would be pilot projects located throughout Miami-Dade County, and we're looking at the opportunity for nature-based solutions to help to manage coastal storm risk. And looking at that opportunity, the location of those different projects, I wanted to highlight real quickly. I saw Tom's comment in the chat about their ability. We'll be looking at locating nature-based features, nature-based solutions within areas where coastal storm risk happens, and looking at that ability for that measure to mitigate that coastal storm risk. So trying to co-locate those where that damage occurs and where we can see those benefits from those features. In addition to the nature-based solutions, which we'll talk a little bit more about, the programmatic non-structural studies. So in this effort, we'll be looking at more complex features such as critical infrastructure that may not be typical. We may need to deep dive to look at different elements of critical infrastructure. And then also for larger multifamily residential buildings. So in the 2024 actionable measures, we included buildings that included up to four families within a building, because that could be similar to a large residential structure for a single family. But when you start to add additional families, that becomes a little more complicated on what floodproofing measures or what measures are available for those types of structures. So that will allow us to look more closely and more individually at those types of structures. Again, want to celebrate the win of getting to the Chiefs report in August. So additionally, in the 2024 report, we want to just highlight some common themes that we heard, certainly through our coordination and working through the different, working with our stakeholders, multiple lines of defense. One thing we'll say, certainly working with our non-federal sponsor, is that we are not the solution for everything. We understand that there are great efforts going on in Miami-Dade County. And so we identify our features, our plans as just one piece of a much broader, bigger picture. And so we know that there are many different, again, efforts going on, and hopefully through that collaboration, we can continue to complement those efforts, and ultimately together they become a better, resilient picture. Want to continue to look at adaptive management, flexible over time, looking at what are those short-term needs, what are things we can get a quick win on, and then what are things that need additional review over a longer period of time. I know Christian talked about structural measures. Those are certainly require more in-depth evaluation and looking at the benefits they could provide, but also need to look at impacts. And so it's a much broader, longer term need that would take additional study. And then again, integration of programs and projects and studies. As I mentioned, there are a number of great efforts going on, and want to make sure, one, that we are complementary to those different efforts, and ultimately, again, coming to one umbrella for increased resilience. Christian?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so folks, you might be familiar with the multiple lines of defense concept, but just for anyone who might be new, when we see or expect a storm surge, right, that comes from the ocean side, or could come from the south, but we know that we have different parts of our community, whether they're underwater, along the shoreline, or on land, where we can better manage that risk. So we know that coral or hybrid reefs offshore are sort of our first line of defense. Other Army Corps projects look at beach renourishment, but we can look at the dune system and reinforce those to help provide additional benefits. The surge barrier gates, as we mentioned, are not being recommended at this time, but can be studied in the future. But of course, we are so lucky to have special species like mangroves and other wetland plants and ecosystems that provide multiple benefits, right? Including potentially coastal storm surge risk reduction. But then we also want to look on land, right? We've been talking about if the storm surge does, get to our buildings and our homes, what can we do to elevate those or flood-proof critical facilities? So we want to try to implement wherever there are opportunities, these different types of measures. And part of what's being done, as mentioned with the 2024 Chiefs report, is these first three, right? What we call non-structural. So in yellow, across 6 different focus areas, you can see a few of them represented on the graphic here. We're going to flood-proof critical facilities, elevate residential buildings, and flood-proof commercial buildings, all on a voluntary basis. But whether it's on the barrier island in Miami Beach or further inland near our canals, we know that there are buildings that need help in adapting and become more resilient to storm surge. In addition, as Michelle described, the nature-based solution pilot program will give us an opportunity to, identify, assess, design, build, and probably most importantly, monitor how some of these nature-based solutions can be placed, whether it's in the water, offshore, or on land, helping bolster these green and blue spaces that offer so much to our community. Whether that's hybrid offshore reefs, like I said, dune reinforcement, living shorelines, or even looking at areas that have mosquito ditches or other areas that have been altered that could be restored and ultimately provide coastal storm risk management benefits. So we're really excited about this, which we waiting for that authorization in the Water Resources Development Act to really kick this initiative off. But it's a huge opportunity for the county to partner with the Army Corps and all the other expertise that we have here locally and advance this and help hopefully create lessons learned for other cities across the country. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Geisen, who's actually joining us from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Jacksonville District as one of the senior project managers there. So Tim, if you want to talk to us about regional integration efforts that your district is leading.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate you having me on tonight. Talk a little bit about kind of the integration effort and what that means in terms of this study and the other ongoing core efforts within the region. And I appreciate, Christian, the focus on that integration and talking about how communication and collaboration between multiple levels of government is really important when we talk about community resilience. Without that kind of coordination of efforts, we really can't be successful long-term in maintaining our community resiliency as we face a lot of concerns with climate change, with population increases, land use changes. So that coordination as we move forward is going to be really, really important, not only with the Corps in the county, but also with other state agencies, local municipalities, as well as non-government organizations, private sector, and the public. So that's really a key, and I'm glad we highlighted that. Everybody is involved in building community resilience, and that collaboration is key to that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other ongoing core efforts and how those tie into the regional community system and how they work together to establish resilience. Starting kind of with the coastal areas that Christian already really highlighted, we have in our coastal storm risk management business line, we have, of course, this ongoing study of the Miami-Dade Back Bay, but also the Key Biscayne Coastal Storm Risk Management Project along the coast. And those projects really focus on the coastal storms, the storm surge that we get coming from the ocean into the inland areas. We then kind of move to the inland areas and talk about flood risk management. So in the Corps speak, flood risk management is really the waters coming from the inland areas towards the coast. And of course, with the low-lying areas that we have, especially in Southeast Florida, those two storms come together and create compound flooding. So that's something that we're working as an agency to make sure that we are talking between our two different business lines that typically don't integrate, and trying to make sure that we do start integrating those efforts, talking amongst ourselves, making sure that we're looking for complementary benefits, making sure that one project is not creating negative impacts to the others, and really looking for ways that we can enhance the overall community resilience through those efforts. So the flood risk management study that we've got going on, which many of you may have heard about, is called the Central and Southern Florida Flood Resiliency Study, or Section 216. That effort covers all that water coming from the western part of the county from the north, making its way through the canal system out to the coast. So we look at those impacts of combined flooding, but also the flood impacts that we see in the canals, in that primary canal system. And that's where kind of integration of efforts becomes really important. The Corps, along with the South Florida Water Management District, really operates and maintains the primary network of canals and structures that move water from the inland areas to the coast. But the smaller canals, the secondary and what we call tertiary networks, are really the focus of the state and the local governments. So it's really important that as we develop these larger regional scale projects, that the smaller projects that feed into those are considered in order to achieve the maximum benefits. And then finally, as you move further into the inland areas, where we look at our aquatic ecosystem restoration projects, which are really focused on not only just the restoration of those ecosystems, but regional water storage, which becomes really important because the more water that we can keep in the inland areas, we get water quality improvements as that water slowly moves its way to the coast, but it also lessens the impacts to flood risk from inland rainfall. And then finally, kind of tying in one of our other business lines, which may not at first thought be thought of as part of water resource resiliency, is our navigation projects. And we've got a large navigation project with the Port of Miami ongoing. And that's really focused on economic resilience, which I think for long-term sustained community resilience, it's really looking at the economic resilience as well as our water resource system resilience. And those things really do tie together. So that kind of gives you an overview of all of the things that we've got going on within Dade County. So you can see there's 5 large federal projects ongoing, along with all of the other things that the state and the county and other local municipalities are doing. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the CNSF Flood Resilience Project, the 216. So the map on the right that you see, that was our kind of original study area. We were very ambitious when we kicked this off, and we're looking at the entirety of Broward and Dade counties and all of those coastal structures, which provide inland flood risk management. As we made our way through the process, we kind of took our own advice and really thought, you know, we need to break this into smaller pieces that are more achievable and figure out ways we can integrate those efforts with other entities and other authorities to really accomplish the same goals, but with smaller bite-sized pieces. So our path forward now is really looking at each of the 4 planning reaches, which we established in the original 216 study, Reach A in Broward County, Reach B, the very southern part of Broward County and the northern part of Dade County, Reach C, kind of in the heart of Dade County, the Miami River, the downtown area, and then the southern part of Dade County and Reach D. So rather than trying to tackle those all under one study, we've broken it up into different pieces, all using different authorities to try to achieve the same benefits. For Reach A, that's being conducted under what's called Section 203, which allows a non-federal sponsor to move forward a study on their own with support from the Corps. So the South Florida Water Management District, in collaboration with Broward County, is moving forward Reach A under Section 203. That was approved by the Assistant Secretary of the Army back in August, and we're currently working with the Water Management District in Jacksonville on the agreements that will allow us to support that effort. In Reach B, the state, the Water Management District, in coordination with Dade County, has several ongoing efforts looking at those 4 structures in Reach B, or the C7, C8, C9 basins. So those structures are being tackled using FEMA grants as well as Resilient Florida grant funding to provide upgrades to those coastal structures for Reach B. And then some of the other efforts that may be required for longer term resilience would be picked up in future studies, something like the CNSF comprehensive study, which we received authority back, and we're at 2022 for that large study. Reach C, which will be of great interest to most of you, will continue utilizing the Section 216 authority. So kind of the original study that included that larger regional 4-basin area is now being condensed down, focused on Reach C, which will really allow us to kind of focus some of the integration efforts with our other ongoing projects, but also with the county and with the some of the other local municipalities to really come up with a flood risk management project that can have a lot of benefit within that more focused Reach C area. We're currently in the process of getting an exception to our planning policy requirements, which kind of limit our funding and schedule. Based on all of the work we've done to this point, we realize that it's going to take more than the 3 years and $3 million that were allowed. So we're in the process of requesting an exemption to give us more time and more funds to complete that study within Reach C. So that currently is at our headquarters in Washington, being reviewed, and we anticipate having a decision on that sometime later this calendar year. That study will focus on kind of the 5 structures that are part of Reach C. 4 of those will likely move forward. One of the structures is kind of a small culvert structure, which may not meet the minimum requirements. So we plan to move forward with the 4 larger coastal structures on the C6 canal, as well as those on the C4 and C5 canals. We're targeting a WRDA 2030 for authorization of this effort, which is stretching out a little bit further than we had originally anticipated, but will allow us a lot more time for collaboration with all of the stakeholders. And then Reach D in that southern part of Dade County is really an area that has, based on the modeling that we have done under the 216 study to date, really is shown to be dominated by coastal storm risk. So that water coming from the coastal areas is really the driving factor for flooding in the southern part of the county. And the 216 study doesn't allow us to address that specifically. And then we also heard from stakeholders that flows into Biscayne Bay and that water quality was of a big concern, which is also something that we really weren't able to address under 216. So the idea would be to focus efforts in Reach D in the CNSF comprehensive study, which is a much broader authority and will allow us to look at additional infrastructure to address both coastal storm risk and water quality concerns by potentially incorporating storage and new infrastructure that would be outside of the purview of the 216. So I think we have a pretty good integrated plan to address this entire study area in terms of coastal storm risk, but also have some opportunities using different authorities with different sponsors to also address some other needs for long-term community resilience. So I'm sure we'll be back talking to you more about integration and the 216 study in particular in the months to come. So appreciate the time allowing me to talk tonight, Christian.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I know for a lot of folks, this is a lot of information, right? There's so many efforts going on at the same time, and just encourage folks to continue to follow not only the Jacksonville district work of the Army Corps and the South Florida Water Management District, who does resiliency forums and webinars and other meetings to help keep folks who are interested in the loop on this stuff. So more to come on all this. A lot of great work, I'll just say real quick, being done by the Miami-Dade County RER DERM, Division of Environmental Resource Management, who is a big part of managing the county's canal systems, the beach projects, and our overall stormwater master planning work. So a lot of integration efforts there. With that, I'll turn it back to Michelle to go over most of what we've talked about is where we've been, right? Recapping on the different projects that have been recommended, and hopefully moving forward with the 2024 report. You just heard from Tim about the regional other projects and efforts that the Army Corps is partnering with us on. And now really, in large part, why we gathered folks tonight, we want to talk about this continuing study, this 2027 report scoping. So Michelle, please, thanks.
Well, thank you, Christian. So as we start this feasibility study, we want to go back and revisit our study objectives. So that's something you've probably heard from us before. You're like, why do we need to revisit it? Well, we want to make sure that, again, that we're continuing to glean public input to inform the study objectives, which formulate our foundation for our study. So again, throughout Miami-Dade County, we want to increase resilience of critical infrastructure and reduce damage to buildings in vulnerable communities and prioritize human health and life safety. Some of the things that we're looking at certainly as we continue to focus on sea level rise. And so that will be a sea level change, as we call it. That will be in addition to water surface elevations that we consider from inundation within the feasibility study. So we'll continue to focus on our USACE high curve, and that will, I believe that equates, I can't see it, I apologize, on my screen. There it is, 4.5 feet in addition to, so if we look out from today until the end of when we expect the end of the analysis, we look at it, we start today, but then we also look at when we expect construction would be complete. And this number may modify as we continue through the feasibility study, but when we expect the construction of the recommended plan to be complete, that is when we would start to accrue benefits, and that's damage reduction. And then we look out 50 years for an economic life, and that right now is approximately 2095. And so that increased sea level rise is about 4.5 feet into the end of that economic analysis. So that will be factored into the plans that the features that we evaluate, and then also looking at the damage that we expect to occur. So this is another slide that's similar to what you may have seen in the past. So we were looking at the different phases previously, feasibility study and pre-construction engineering and design, and then construction and operations and maintenance. And this just dives into that feasibility phase and where we are in. So we were right here at that gold star, right at the beginning of scoping. We want to make sure that we are touching base with you first. We don't want to get too far ahead of you, and want to make sure that we're getting all that great input first to, again, inform of how we're setting the stage for the feasibility study. So on this chart, we're looking at the different phases of the feasibility study, which begins with scoping. Then we jump into alternatives, evaluation, and analysis. And then the feasibility analysis of the selected plan, a recommended plan, and then we certainly have Washington level review. We'll have some internal milestones along the way, an alternatives milestone, and a tentatively selected plan. That tentatively selected plan is then reflected in a draft report, which goes out for public review. And then we will glean those comments from public and respond, and have another milestone called an agency decision milestone. And that's where we share with our vertical leadership the comments that we receive from the public and how we're able to address them in the tentatively selected plan first, but ultimately what becomes the recommended plan. And then that will culminate in a final report, and then ultimately in a chief's report. So we did kick off after we had the signature for our chief's report. That kind of kicked us off. That time frame kicked us off into this study. So here we are today with our virtual webinar. In November, we're going to have an in-person public scoping meeting, and then certainly work towards those additional milestone meetings, as I was mentioning. We're going to focus again on non-structural measures and critical infrastructure. Those are those quick things that we feel like can help improve resiliency within Miami-Dade County. We're also going to focus on continuing to discuss and describe the comprehensive framework to investigate multiple lines of defense. So this is that much bigger study that would be necessary to investigate and design structural measures such as storm surge barriers across our water bodies. And so, of course, as you can imagine, that's going to take more time and effort. It will be informed by the ERDIC modeling that's currently going on, but we want to be sensitive and be able to evaluate what kind of impacts that might have, not only on the water quality for the sensitive Biscayne Bay, but also looking at the resources that might be adjacent to where those structures might be proposed. And then again, looking at nature-based solutions, we acknowledge that this has been, we've heard loud and clear, this is a very important topic to Miami-Dade County and to the citizens. They would like to see us incorporate more of those opportunities. So we'll be able to look at formulations, start to talk about what does some of that look like. Not confident that that would be included in the 2027 report, but that discussion definitely will. So not sure we'll be able to get actionable on that, but we'll continue to, provide updates to the public. The one last thing I wanted to get to before we jump away from the slide is your input is really important. So we want to make sure that even though we have timeframes when we come out to you, we want to make sure that we're coming out to you more frequently, similar to what you saw in the 2024 report. And even before that, when we were working with the county for a year to kind of revision what it was going to look like, your input is really important. So we want to make sure we're having those touch points with you along the way. In 2024, we focused on 6 focus areas. Those were Biscayne Canal, Little River, Miami River, Cutler Bay, North Beach, and South Beach. So how we came up with those areas is we identified that those areas of frequent inundation, right? Where were the areas that were impacted the most and most frequently? And then we intersected that with the boundaries from the environmental justice for environmental justice communities using the climate and economic justice screening tool. And then we informed those boundaries based on local knowledge, right? So CJUST is great. It helps to highlight areas, but really it's on the ground and the local knowledge. It really helps us refine what those areas look like. And that helped us identify those 6 focus areas. So similarly, we're going to look at doing that same type analysis, but really want to hear from you. What neighborhoods are vulnerable to storm surge, and what would you like to see us prioritize for inclusion? We're also going to consider other factors such as building type and age and future development and neighborhood cohesion. So as we think about measures within a neighborhood, we want to be sensitive to how that neighborhood works and how that neighborhood, what they see as their identity. So really would like to hear your feedback on what we could consider in those areas. And then question number 2, are there any critical infrastructure facilities types that should be considered in this feasibility study? One thing that's different than what we did in 2024. So in 2024, we used the FEMA inundation to the storm surge to inform our economic analysis. In this study, we are changing over to the South Atlantic coastal study. You might remember that was done a few years ago, and that's what we will use to inform the water surface elevations and the inundation. And so we'll take those water surface elevations and project them into the land to see how does that all work? Where are we going to see some wraparound flooding and some impacts, and that will help inform not only our modeling here, but again, into the future, that'll help us consider that. We'll also look at the sea level rise through that modeling. Right now, what you're seeing on the screen is a map of inundation. Now that's the 200-year floodplain, or what we know is the 0.5% annual chance. That means every year there is a 0.5% chance that you could see inundation of this level. So again, we're going to look at The CGIS modeling, want to inform that, really want to get the local knowledge on what those communities should look like. We're expanding beyond the focus areas that we considered in 2024. Want to make sure we're getting your input on where we should consider in 2027, in addition to focusing in on that tool and intersecting that again with the inundation. What we can, so I did want to step back and, what does non-structural mean? So non-structural means it's a measure on a structure that doesn't change the flooding. If you look at a structural measure that prevents flooding or reduces the risk of flooding, storm surge from coming in, it keeps the water out. It's a physical barrier. When we look at non-structural measures, that actually removes the risk or the damage that will occur from the storm. So it doesn't change the water level, but it just takes what could be damaged and elevates that, or provides barriers so that building would not be impacted. Examples include elevating electrical equipment. These are stop logs that you might put in front of a door, as we saw earlier, and as you see on the right. You can install temporary flood panels. We saw that for the Tampa General Hospital. And elevating buildings. You can elevate, you ask any contractor and they say they can elevate anything. We look at crawl spaces and slabs, and what they would do is certainly take jacks and very slowly elevate that structure to a design elevation. It takes time, but it certainly can be done, and then certainly finish it after that elevation is complete. So the next steps is we are going to conduct a public meeting. That'll be an in-person meeting, and we'll certainly make sure that we have that information out to the public, make sure you know where that will be and how you can come visit us. There'll also be opportunities, as always. Please feel free to send us an email, letting us know what your comments are and things that would be considered. Your comments now will be considered in our draft report. Also, we continue to have the crowdsourced reporter tool, so you can go online and identify a location within the county and identify where the problems may be or where you'd like us to consider evaluating. And then certainly, if you're old school like me, feel free to drop us a letter in the mail. We do consider those as well. We also have a phone number available if you'd like to give us a call.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. So that pretty much concludes our presentation, but now we'd like to transition to a question and answer session. So I think maybe we've seen a few questions in the chat, and appreciate everyone sticking with us this evening. We'll be here and answer every question that comes through the chat. So I think I'd like to turn it over to Sandra or Martina in our staff to help share the first couple questions that we might have.
Hey, Christian. Hey, everyone. Some of the questions have already been answered in the chat. So Christian, I don't know if you wanted to sort of repeat them or answer any of them that haven't been answered yet.
Okay. I think let's maybe start with the ones that haven't been answered yet. And if there's anyone whose question has been answered in the chat, but they need clarification, please let us know.
Sounds good. I think the first one that hasn't been answered yet is from John Wall asking, so 2027 Chiefs report would then require authorization and funding prior to contracting for any construction?
Sorry, for some reason. Yeah, I'm trying to find the mute button. So John, thank you for that question. Similar to the 2024 report, we would require, once we are able to complete that feasibility study, that would result in a chief's report, which ultimately would be included. We expect it to be included in Water Resources Development Act, which would authorize it. Prior to authorization, it can go into pre-construction engineering and design if we sign a design agreement. And then what's also important about that is any funding that would support that would need to be coordinated through a presidential budget. And so Jacksonville would take the lead on coordinating the pre-construction engineering and design, and they would submit their capability or what we submit or ability to do work through the budget process. So a couple different things. One, need to coordinate for it to be included and be authorized, but also need to coordinate so that we can procure federal funding.
Thanks, Michelle. We have another question from Johan. Under which reach will Miami Beach be covered, or do our canals not qualify because unconnected to mainland network?
I think that question might be based on Tim Geison's presentation, the different reaches. So I don't know, Tim, if you're able to come off and let them know.
Sure, yeah, I can answer that. So yeah, Miami Beach would be downstream of the Central and Southern Florida network of canals and structures. So the study that would be part of Reach B, that would be upstream from Miami Beach. So the local canals that are part of the flood risk management system there would not be covered under that particular study. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be a future effort or something under the comprehensive study that we could look at that, but it wouldn't be part of the Reach B efforts right now.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, Martina or Shannon.
Yeah, next question is from Senan Garcia, who is part of the Miami Reef Initiative. Senan says that they plan to perform significant outplanting of coral along the Miami County line in the next 1 to 2 years. And their question is if there was a sand study that was going to be performed, what is the status of that study?
I don't know if Tim from the Jacksonville district, they're talking about a sand study and the corals out there. I don't know if you're aware or could speak to that.
No, I'm not aware of that, but it sounds like something I should look into.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And then we'll I think we definitely can track down the answer to that and get back to you, unless there's someone else from our staff on who can speak to that. Okay, thanks, and then we'll get back to you on that one. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Some of the other questions have been answered in the chat by Michelle and Justine. So if anybody else has any questions, this would be your chance to type it up in the chat. Another question from Johan. Any thoughts on benefit to county or municipal acquisition of subterranean rights for stormwater cisterns? Worth it or a drop in the bucket?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I wouldn't say that's something that I think our Office of Resilience is actively pursuing. I think we in general are interested in trying to deal with the stormwater issues, knowing that it's can be difficult in really built out areas. So of course, when you think about putting infrastructure underground, we have to ask questions about how feasible that is with our geology and our groundwater. And of course, there's significant permitting that has to occur with that too. So If you have more information about that or have seen that done in other places, definitely let us know and we can take a look or pass it on to some of our other county staff or experts who work on this kind of thing.
Another question from Carrie. Any possibility of sea hives off of Broward Coast?
Yeah, another good question. Thanks, Carrie. I think I don't know, Tim, if there's, this back-based study we're talking about here is focused on Miami-Dade County. So I don't want to speak for Broward County, certainly. That'd be a good question to explore with them. But I don't know if there's any possibility of a future, broader comprehensive study that that might include that in its scope in South Florida. But
So I know Broward County has its own coastal storm risk management authorizations. Whether that would fall under one of those existing, I'm not sure. I don't know if Chris is on, he might have an idea, but I haven't talked too much with Broward about some of those coastal initiatives. So I'm not aware that they've got anything right now.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, Carrie, definitely would encourage you to reach out to Broward County's Office of Resilience. They might be able to help guide you a little bit. Okay, any other questions?
I think everyone had their questions answered in the chat or verbally. So maybe we'll just give another minute or two for someone who has any last minute questions.
Yep, that sounds good. While we're seeing if there's any other questions, I'll just reiterate for folks, as was mentioned before, please save the date for November 13th. That's when we're planning to have an in-person scoping meeting to talk about similar to what we talked about today, but just an opportunity for community members to meet us face to face, the county, the Army Corps staff, and other partners to talk about this initiative and what priorities that you all have and want to see advanced. We'll put it in the chats, and then it's November 13th. That'll be in the evening. We'll let you know as soon as we have the details on the location and how to sign up and register. We'll be sharing that out through the Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience and the Army Corps website for this study. Okay, last call for any other questions. Otherwise, we will be wrapping up tonight's webinar and saving the recording so that we can share it with folks afterwards. I don't know if Patricia or Michelle, if you have any closing thoughts.
No, I will say thank you again for being with us today, with everybody that participated in this webinar, and we are looking forward to your participation at the November 13th scoping meeting. And I'll pass it on to Michelle if she wants to say anything else.
Oh, thank you so much. Absolutely. We look forward to seeing you on the 13th and look forward to hearing your comments. So thank you. Even if you didn't have a comment today, if you be sure to send us an email with your thoughts, we look forward to seeing those. So thank you so much for your time today.
All righty. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you.